Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author and robot, and today we're going to be doing a book review, talk, whatever you want to call it, for Among the Hunted by Caytlyn Brooke. That is Caitlin with two Y's. Never seen that before, but it's a book about nymphs and Greek gods that get high by raping them. Consider that your warning. But before we get started, a couple of things. Number one, if you enjoy what I do on this channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Two, if you would like to be featured on this channel, check out the links down below. Lamoy is the monthly writing contest. I give you a prompt, you write, I read them, first video of the month. And then the second thing is Pitch Fit, where if you've got a creative project, you pitch it to me through the form and I pitch it on this channel, and hopefully everybody gets more exposure. I could mention the loin stream here, but you'll just have to come back on Friday to see what that's all about. It goes live around 8:15 p.m. Eastern time. And I think that's all. So let's go ahead and get started into what is Among the Hunted. How I found it, why I found it. I don't know why I keep running into all of these. And by running into, I mean actually reading all of these fantasy books when, like, this style of fantasy and epic fantasy and like super adventure fantasy are really not my favorite kind of thing. I like urban fantasy kind of stuff and magical realism the most. Like I get more into urban fantasy when it gets closer to magical realism because I like the character driven stuff, and I like when magic and occultism or other levels of living planes or whatever is mixed with reality, and we can see an overlay or an interpretation of the world through this mystical lens, through this god lens, through this magic lens. I love that kind of stuff. You know, I've got that with Bodymore when you've got the world of the dead layered on top of the living world. I'll have it later down the line with Not Dead, which will be the duology following after Bodymore, and with Ghost Walks, which is more gonna have like occultism, like the reality of occultism along and magic with a fake street magician that kind of picks people's pockets. So, like, I like the layering of reality and magic and making magic real in our world and not just going totally into a new direction. So I don't know how or why I keep finding this stuff. And this one technically gets a lot closer to that, but also it still doesn't. It only vaguely references kind of the real world as things are, but we'll get into that. So I found this book while browsing Twitter. The author popped up in the feed on the writing community stuff, and so I checked out her Goodreads page. I check out a lot of books based on them popping up on Twitter. And by check out, I mean I go to their Goodreads page, and this one I definitely picked up because I saw that the rating was below 3 stars, and there were a bunch of 1 stars dinging the book for rape specifically. So obviously, considering it's kind of a touchy subject for a lot of people, I clearly had to read the book to see if it was as bad as the comments were implying. Does that make me a bad person? Don't let people tell you that bad reviews don't get readers. I bought this book only because of the bad reviews, so I could see what was really up in this book. But that said, let's go on the adventure. Also, it should be noted that this, again, really isn't my genre. Apparently, everybody and their mother writes fantasy and elemental fantasy right now. Looking at a couple of you. And it's just not something that I like. But I had to see what the reviews were talking about, so that's really all that I cared about. Tuck yourself in because here we go. The novel starts out by introducing Kate, a nymph and one of the protagonists, as she spars with her sister. For the first short while of the book, you meet her sisters, get some background story on nymphs and elemental magic, what they do, the history of nymphs being raped and genocided by the Greek gods, and that's all pretty much why they don't trust the gods, and they train for war constantly, in preparation in case they ever get attacked again. Things get complicated when Kate visits the Earth realm with her best friend, Willow. They just like the atmosphere, the style, the dance floor, the party, the stress relief of being around humans, and so it's just kind of a getaway thing after they're done with doing business of being a nymph. This is where Kate meets Hermes. What starts as good reason to distrust quickly turns into a love story, and after just a month of sneaking off to see Hermes on Earth, Kate's thinking of running away from the nymph realm entirely so that she can be with Hermes forever. Turns out that it's not such a great idea as, well, Hermes was never actually in love with Kate. It was all a ploy so Hermes could drug her and rape her and steal her halo, which is the thing that kind of holds her magic, her elemental magic, to her body, so that he could get a high on her elemental magic. Turns out Hermes had been planning that, and he also brought his friend Apollo along to get busy with Kate's friend Willow. Unfortunately for them, Kate's friend wasn't there. Hermes' attempt to drug Kate makes her run off before they can take advantage of her, yet they follow her out of the club and end up raping and murdering Kate's friend Willow in front of her because somehow, after Kate flees from this random club at this random timeline on Earth, Willow happens to also be there. Before they can get to Kate, however, she's rescued. So nothing bad happens to Kate other than she sees this thing happen and she was drugged. Fast forward 100 years and we pretty much watch the exact same story play out to Kate's sister, Jeslam, who, although she previously railed against Kate for being so naive that she would fall for a god, because obviously gods can't be trusted, Jeslam is now falling for a god, saying, oh no, but this one is different. Let's also note that the god that she's falling for is named Basil. And I feel like with all of the folklore out there, like if you consider human folklore, because unless Greek gods are not written about at all on the Earth in this universe, I feel like you could just do some kind of history buffing for anybody named Basil, because the elemental nymphs are very connected in the supernatural way to the gods, and know of the gods and know of the history. And Basil, just between Hermes and Herma and Zeus and Apollo and, you know, all of the names, Basil doesn't really feel like a believable god name. But somehow she falls for that. Anyway, Jeslam is eventually talked out of going to meet this god because Kate's like, you're getting tricked. And Jeslam's like, you know what, you're probably right. I cannot believe I was so stupid to fall for this. Really, Jez? Really? So the two girls decide that they're going to plot against this god so that they can go and catch him in a trap, because this guy has also been like raping other nymphs and stealing their halos and littering the earth with their bodies. And once a nymph's halo is taken, they become mortal and their connection to the ethereal elemental realm is severed. So what is the plan exactly? Well, apparently it's just that Jeslam is going to show up to meet the god. Kate's going to hide in the bushes, and they're not going to tell anybody else that this is going on, because they just think that they can jump on this guy when he shows up. Yeah. That doesn't, just as you might expect, that really doesn't turn out very well. And Jeslam gets raped, and Kate disappears into the ether just before she gets attacked as well. Obviously, now Jeslam is mortal and can't return to the nymph realm. However, Kate is in the nymph realm, and so she tries to get help in dealing with Zeus from the nymph council. But they not only refuse to help her, they ban her from going to the earth realm, period. And she's not allowed to tell anybody about the things that she has experienced. They do say that you can tell your sister, I guess, her little sister. She's got two sisters. So they're like, you can tell your little sister, I guess. But if you tell your little sister, she's also banned from leaving the nymph universe. But at least it gives you somebody to, like, vent to, right? So now Kate and her little sister, Bia, are both grounded to the nymph realm because Kate needed to vent at somebody. And so, yeah. And nobody is helping them deal with this, the gods are going crazy, apparently raping nymphs situation. After Kate is released and allowed to return to the human realm, she goes looking for answers because she wants revenge on Zeus, as you do. Kate runs into a shape-shifting nymph named Layla just before Zeus shows up to complain about being a prisoner of the Earth realm, having to live with Layla in Layla's household for protection against the ire of the council, and then he rapes her too. Just mid-rape, Zeus sees Kate and tries to catch her, but Kate's too fast, and she returns to the nymph realm before anything bad can happen to her. Upon returning, Kate's approached by others in the realm, telling her that a wind nymph is out of control in the desert and causing sandstorms. Kate goes to aid the nymph, only to discover the nymph's not only already dead, but the whole thing was a trap set up by Zeus so that he could try to capture Kate. By now, we're about 35% through the book, and that's important to say because at this point, we're introduced to a brand new POV that is entirely different and has not been introduced whatsoever up to this point. And this is some human named Blake. He's kind of a loser. He gets bullied at school, his mom was abused by his dad, and he feels extra bad for women in general because of it. This is important to say because it'll become one of his main motivating factors to help Kate in the future. Now, Blake's just minding his own business going for a run when he sees a pretty girl floating in the water. He's pretty sure that she's dead, but it turns out that it's just Kate after she barely escaped Zeus's clutches again. Blake brings Kate home, cleans her up, gives her clothes, and gives her a place to sleep. During the night, she flees his house. All of this is just to seal Blake's doom because he happened to interact with Kate, and Zeus is like, no. Kate's hanging out in some random cafe in the human world, trying to think of how she's going to deal with Zeus all on her own when he randomly shows up at her table. He talks about how he so badly wants to rape her right then and there, and if she causes a scene, he's freaking gonna do it. He is the god of gods after all, and if she rejects him, he will have her on the table and murder everyone in the cafe, so she better do as he freaking says. Also, he demands that she submit to him or else the human that she spoke to, meaning Blake, will, also die. Kate escapes Zeus again in this situation, barely able to flee to the nymph realm yet again. When Kate goes back to the nymph realm, she can't find her little sister, Bia. She learns that Bia's gone into hiding, maybe in the human realm, and she's in danger. Meanwhile, Blake is now being targeted for death by Herma because of Zeus. However, a poison soda meant for him actually gets ingested by Blake's BFF, and Blake is just like, what the hell is going on? Bia appears to Blake and explains to him everything that is going on and how he is being targeted by Zeus and the gods, and how the gods get this high from this thing called euphoria, when they rape a nymph and steal their magic. And so that is what is happening to Kate. That's why Kate is being pursued by Zeus. And that is now why Blake is being attacked by Zeus as well, because he assisted in Kate's escape. Then, Bia takes Blake and his poisoned BFFL into hiding with her. Meanwhile, Kate's sitting on a beach in Vermont thinking about how she's going to lure Zeus out to fight him, even though she literally has no plan, no allies, has talked to nobody about this, but somehow she's already thinking of how can I get him here. She's pulling up her skirt and opening her legs when she's approached by a siren. The both of them are attacked by a mystical saber-tooth-like creature that can catch nymphs and keep them from escaping through their elemental magic, the thing that's kept letting Kate get to the nymph realm, even when she's being attacked by Zeus. This is where Kate's now kidnapped by Zeus. Clearly, she hadn't thought through this plan of, like, luring him into a secluded beach by herself, and how she was going to fight him, because he clearly did exactly what she had been hoping that he would do, which is go up. But she's captured now. Bia takes Blake and Joel to visit the mortalized sister, Jeslum, in Florida, so that they can come up with a battle plan to take on Zeus. While there, Zeus appears to Joel and tells him that he can just fuck right off back to normal life because, well, he's got Kate now, and he'll stop pursuing Blake to kill him if Blake will just go away and not matter. There's really no reason for Zeus to do this beyond maybe that Zeus wanted to kill Blake, but then there's really not been enough investment in this whole situation to even make sense that Zeus would show up and just dismiss Blake. Like, Blake is a literal nothing to Zeus. He didn't need to come and give an explanation, and Blake was immortal, so he didn't have any ability to hunt Zeus down, how to find Zeus, none of this. So I don't even know why Zeus showed up. Anyway, Blake's like, I'm not letting you rape Kate to death, so how about we just play a game instead? And Zeus is like, okay, I'ma hide somewhere on the planet, anywhere on the planet, because I'm a god and I can just teleport places, and if you could find me, Kate can have her freedom, but if you can't find me, I'm gonna rape her in front of you and then kill both of you. How's that sound? Good? Good, because, I'm gonna win this game. I'm a god. Come on. Come on. So Blake's like, dear god of gods, this sounds absolutely doable. I can beat Zeus, even though I didn't believe in gods like 2 days ago. Zeus disappears. Blake goes back to the Nymph sisters to tell them what happened, and they're like, what the hell did you just do? As if any of this is actually Blake's fault. All he did was make a meaningless bet that's gonna get him killed. Let's be honest, he's got absolutely no power in this situation. Older sister Jeslum then says if they're gonna take on Zeus, then they're gonna need some godly help, and she knows a fallen god from the Titan War, you know, The one that genocided her people and that she's continuously forever been training for with all of the other nymphs, just in case they ever got attacked by gods again. Yeah, she wants to go and get one of those soldiers. And so they're like, we can go and talk to him and see if he'll help us fight Zeus, because he's on the outs with Zeus. But you think he likes nymphs better? Okay. I don't know why anyone in this position, who has already been abused by the gods, who knows people who were recently abused by the gods, would even pretend to trust a soldier god that raped and genocided her people. Like, it won't turn into a backstabbing situation, but you do you, Ches. There's a reason that you're mortal now. Is that mean to say? Needless to say, Blake learns how to fight the gods with like actual weapons, like swords and stuff, in about 2 days. Backstabbing happens in this whole situation. Zeus restrains himself from raping Kate for the 3 days that their game is going on, even though we've been told that he's an addict losing control, and we go through periods of training with Blake to public scenes of Zeus fingering Kate, because this book feels like an authorial sexual fantasy at this point, you know, one of domination. And there's an ultimate showdown where people die and don't die, and then Kate ends up killing Zeus, and the story ends with Herma being pissed because Zeus was killed. The end. Like, that's it. So, welcome to the after show. I really don't know how I keep ending up with these kinds of stories. Someone recently called me the divination rod for rape stories. It just keeps happening. Somebody help me, please. Before getting into the critical discussion part of this, I do want to say that I thought the tension in the opening scene with Kate and Hermes, from running into him and slowly building that relationship with her choices to trust him, even though she has a history and her people have a history of not trusting gods, that was really great. And I wish that there had been more of that. There were opportunities abundantly throughout this to build tension and to give characters a chance to have relationships with one another and to just see them be around each other. And it would have been so good because of the way that Kate and Hermes were introduced. But instead, this story went from plot point to plot point at breakneck speed, and you never really got invested in any of the characters. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Right now, I just want to say that when this book took the time to slow down and let characters interact and let relationships build and to be in the moment instead of pushing the plot forward, it was great. And seeing the tension and the distrust play out in these interpersonal relationships based on historical precedent, and then having to see characters get out of their comfort zone because they have these feelings instead, was great. And I wish that the author had leaned a little more into that to build out the relationships throughout the story a little bit more. It would have been so interesting and such an interesting concept and an interesting dynamic to see these different relationships throughout. That said, getting into the more critical response, the pacing of the book felt entirely off, and I'm starting to think that it's just because I read books that are more for characters, and books like this are obviously more about plot and not about the character, so it speeds through character building moments, which I would prefer, making every interaction shallow, short, and feel meaningless. In Chapter 2, we're introduced to Hermes as Kate is infatuated with him at first, but fearful. By Chapter 4, he's a bad guy. He's not even a real bad guy. He's a cardboard cutout flat bad guy, laughing about rape, ending every other sentence with, "my dear," talking like a bro to Apollo. Going past that, the drama of falling in love and the first rape is repeated. You get a cycle 1 in the first 13%, and the repeated episode goes on to 25%. At this point, we're introduced to Blake shortly thereafter, and it becomes what feels like his story because we're spending a lot of time with him as he's looking like the savior to Kate's problem, and then Kate gets captured. However, this is also an attempt at a woman's empowerment story, it feels like, so of course Kate can't be saved by a man, and even though she was in, she was chained to a bed, like in a chamber at some point, she is still the one that wins in the end, even though we were watching Blake travel around with the sisters and then get trained by Atlas. And so, by Kate saving herself in the end, then everything with Blake felt completely pointless, because he didn't have any effect on the ending whatsoever. I don't know why he was there, and I don't know which way the story is trying to lean. From the flow of this novel, it feels like the story actually belonged to Blake, or it should have belonged to Blake. We should have been introduced with him running into Kate. We could have learned about her and her past and all of the other assaults to the nymphs from Blake's perspective as he got pulled into this world that he had no idea even existed. As it is, Blake's introduction is bizarre. His being made out to be a hero in the midsection is weird because he really contributes nothing in the end, and suddenly Kate is no longer chained to a bed in captivity and makes it out just in time, close up to the end of the novel, to put an end to Zeus. The pacing here, so it really just, the pacing was messy and it didn't aid in getting to know any of the characters. There was a lot of potential here to be deep and compelling, and I desperately wanted to see Blake and Kate bonding, to see her want to be there, because in the opening of the novel, we saw her fascination and love for the human spirit when she went dancing in the 20s and when she ran into Hermes, so it gave her something different, and she could have been so attracted to Blake. This would have helped build more value in Blake's chase after Kate and his risking everything for her, and I hate to say it because the whole part of the majority of this novel is just like, it's all balanced on this girl's showing up and then she's gonna get raped, but the investment from Blake really isn't there, other than he wants to be a savior of this girl because he also feels bad that he kind of just let his dad abuse his mom while he was growing up. Like, he feels that guilt. It's not his fault, but it looks like he feels guilt for letting his dad abuse his mom, and not, or for his mom getting abused, and he feels responsible, like he didn't say anything, so now he's got to be a savior for other women. So anyway, there just wasn't a lot of compel in this relationship because you never got invested in the people. So it made the journey of the last third feel super pointless. And then there are a number of time skips in the early part of the book, especially when it comes to meeting Hermes up into the current time setting, which is around chapter 5 or 6, 7, one of those. Which is setting up Jeslam's fall, and the time skips make the whole opening feel pointless. So pointless that the author is skipping through relationships and growth and characterization to get to the rape. Nice. Finally, the introduction/arc of Atlas felt more like at the end of Act 2, where a betrayal would have happened, and that is also because the introduction of Blake felt like the actual start of the book. So really, it just feels like it was misorganized and not as developed as it should have been. Going back to the character, every bad guy in this book is the same person. Zeus, Apollo, Hermes, and Atlas all talk the same, with the same condescension, evil laughter, and monologuing their evil plans or how they feel the first chance they get. We legit have a villain's monologue the second Hermes is exposed in chapter 4. Zeus continually goes on monologues every time he's on the page. I swear, every single time. Now, I can absolutely get behind gods having their own values and virtues, or lack thereof, and being casual about raping anyone lesser because it really doesn't matter. But then you'd still have to have each of these individual characters talk differently and just have that be part of their casual nature, of their casual culture, that they don't even see anything wrong with it. But instead, you know that they know it's wrong because the author is writing them like they are evil instead of like this is just normal to them. People with similar values aren't just a hive mind that don't have different mannerisms or manners of speaking or personalities, and it would have been much more interesting to make all of these characters more dimensional but broken rather than just standy villains who monologue about raping people and laughing. The female villains are similar in how they are villainous, using their bodies, coercing in soft voices, touching people. We mostly saw this in Layla and the Siren, but there was a little of this in Herma as well when she was around. Finally, there's the heroine Kate, who is pretty much what I would call a Sue. She doesn't face any real consequences. She is constantly protected where she should have been assaulted like multiple times. And for what purpose other than that not letting actual bad things befall upon her, because you have to control the bad things that happen. Everyone around her is fodder for her suffering so that she can go look at what happened to other people who are around me rather than look at what happened to me. We are told that Zeus is a sexual euphoria addict like multiple times. He's losing control, he's getting sloppy, but that is nowhere to be seen in the interaction. Mildly related to this, because this is how Kate is presented earlier on, she's one of the best nymphs at fighting, but she's just a fuck up. I'm kind of tired of this characterization that's just being presented for MCs, and then we never actually see it, or there's no meaning behind it, that it's unaffected. The plot is unaffected by this character being amazing, but just kind of outlandish so nobody likes them, or they just don't know where they fit in. Kate never really showed that she was one of the best fighters, and her mess up was just that she didn't know where she belonged. She was kind of like Ariel-ish, but not. while her two sisters knew what they wanted to do with their future and were already specializing. It doesn't make her likable, it just makes her look like a Sue. And I love the setup of a nymph that doesn't quite fit in with the others and loves hanging out with humans and being on the mortal realm. More focus on that would have made the story so much more interesting, but this is just barely used, barely explored, and barely let to grow as a character. And I get that this is the first in a series, but we should still actually see this character not fitting in, but actually being good at what she does before she gets to the final fight to kill Zeus. Also, going back to this other one, if you're going to characterize somebody as an addict tumbling out of control and getting sloppy to the point that they're going to get caught, then you need to show it. You're devaluing your own word and proving that your narrator is a liar if the narrator says one thing about a character and they do not display that behavior ever. Zeus was not an addict. He just didn't care. He wasn't losing control and getting sloppy. He just didn't care. The language became distracting to me because it's so inaccurate to the characters. And if you keep saying he's an addict, he's an addict, he's an addict, and then he's constantly going, I'm showing self-control by not doing the thing that I want to do to you right now, then he's not an addict. And I don't know why that language was chosen. Okay, so character, pacing, talk about stakes. They didn't exist. You gotta have stakes to show that there is something threatening your main character that they are going to lose if they don't get on whatever the frick they're supposed to be doing. We knew that there weren't going to be stakes in this book by the first 12% when Hermes had been planning to rape Kate, and it didn't happen. Like, he just decided that they were going to double team Willow instead. But from the beginning of the situation, he brought Apollo specifically for Willow so that he could have Kate. Yet he didn't do anything to Kate when he likely should have and would have. Why didn't that happen? Other than you're not allowed to hurt the main character unless it is a planned hurt that you can then use to push the plot. Like, if you do stuff to like this to the characters and you hadn't really plotted it out, then you're going to have to adjust your plot for how your character would respond to these situations. And a lot of authors plot so hard that they don't have the ability to move how their character responds to something if something unplanned happens or something outside of the plan happens. So they stick to the plan even when it doesn't make sense, and then they force the story forward, and that's what this felt like. And then it just ends up that there are no stakes. In every situation following the Hermes-Apollo situation, Kate is protected so that she's not depurified in what would have been realistic, resulting in the entire plot feeling not only hollow, but more like a personal domination fantasy, because it was literally just Zeus flexing ownership over Kate, stalking Kate, being like, I want to fuck you right here. I could if I wanted to, and you couldn't do anything. And that felt so, like, fetishy. Without doing anything, especially because he never crossed the line with her. Based on what we were told about Zeus, he clearly would have been wrecking her every chance that he got, especially the first chance that he got, because again, he was supposed to be an addict. Also, when Kate talked back to him, she should have gotten smacked or stabbed or harmed. Instead, it was an empty threat of a knife pressed to her throat, and you knew that nothing was going to happen. Like, there was this situation later in the book where she was talking to Zeus and just being like the defiant little girl like you typically do when you're the OP, because nothing bad is going to happen to you when you're talking to somebody that is way out of your leagues. And at the very least, Zeus should have just smacked her across the face and been like, you want something fucking worse than that? Because I will. So to show that there was some stake and that she would get hurt, to make her respond to that. But again, she couldn't be OP if she was going to get actually hurt and then have to respond to being scared of actually getting hurt. And also related, you know Zeus has no power because a literal mortal meets him and feels absolutely no intimidation, shows no fear, shows nothing. There's no energy about him that says, I am a god, you will respect me. Zeus is supposed to be the god of gods, and he doesn't even have a lick of big dick energy. Yeah, there should have been a difference. If you're going to call yourself a god of gods, show fear and let the hero overcome it. Something has to happen. Something has to show. Otherwise, there are no stakes and your villain has no teeth. Totally different issue now. Bia being autistic / representation signaling. So earlier on in the book, you know that Bia is going to be called autistic at some point because of how much she's stuttering and specifically just flapping her hands, including neurodiversity is whatever. Like, whatever you need in your story to tell your story, tell it as you need to tell it. You bring in all of the characters that you need just to make up this person's life. However, this book felt like it was trying too hard, and it was trying to be like, hey, look at the stuff that I know. One was just with the way that BO was written and it felt over the top. Then two, when you get further into the story and Blake brings up stimming and dialogue that is patronizing, like, oh, that's so wonderful that someone with autism is living independently. Good for her. Like, this reads so much like, look at me, I'm educated on this and I'm inclusive. Not to mention how out of place this felt in a story about gods hunting nymphs to rape them for their elemental magic high. And a majority of the cast would know this, and stimming is not like a regular dialogue thing, so it was kind of just forced in there as an education thing to be like, look at me, look what I know. You don't need to put all of this stuff in these books, just have your character there. And this is when the inclusion of different kinds of characters, like an autistic character, feels inauthentic. So just, I'm tired of the virtue signaling. It kills a story, it has no place in a story. Write people, not values, not political points, not patronizing dialogue to be like, you go girl, I'm educated. I feel like this is coming off super harsh, so I'm sorry if that's true. I'm just really annoyed with this whole virtue signaling garbage. And remember, you're here to entertain. If you're writing for political brownie points, you're not telling a story. You're making propaganda and looking for backpats. So I don't know if that was this author's intention with this, but the way this character was written, she came off so try hard. But you know, I've received trying too hard on my stuff before too, so take that all as you will, and let me know what your thoughts are on that type of writing in the comments, because you know what? I know that is a spicy subject, isn't it? This is probably a mistake to even talk about. Okay, moving on from the trigger button. Plot description. I've talked about plot descriptions and how authors do this all of the time. So I read this book because I first saw it on Twitter, like I said, and then I clicked it and saw a bunch of low reviews and DNFs because of the rape in it. Clearly, based on the reviews, I had to see what was so bad about this book. And as a robot who read 120 Days of Sodom with no real response, it really wasn't that bad. But in my opinion, there is a really big problem with the plot description. Rape isn't mentioned in the plot description at all. Now, first I want to say I don't think that you have to warn that rape is going to be in a book just because it is in a book. What I think this book did, though, is it lied by omission to the readers. The rape in the book is one of the primary motivating factors for the main character. It's also one of the primary motivating factors for the villain. It drives literally everything in this story. Kate's friend is raped and murdered, and that's what kicks her into wanting to get revenge with Zeus and then hunting down Zeus. The main villain's entire MO is raping nymphs for a magic high, and the main character is abducted to be raped. So if you read the description, it says that Kate wants revenge after her friend is murdered. That murder just followed the rape. The whole point was the rape, and then the character became mortal, and then she died from her mortal wounds. So the omission of the rape as a central concept of the description reads like it's hiding the rape from readers. And I think that's what's going to end up with more low reviews. A surprise rape at 75% of the way through of a book is completely different from it being the inciting incident for your character and for your story. And when you lie to readers about plot, regardless of the genre or the plot devices, you will generally make readers not happy. So I'm just saying that. I did a whole video on this whole subject, and let me know what your thoughts are on that kind of thing of omitting stuff that is actually very integral to the plot. To the plot initiating, to the main character. Like, what do you think belongs inside of a plot summary, and what can be omitted without making people angry? The final section that I'm going to talk about here is just various character logic and miscellaneous things that I couldn't drop into a single category. Questions about the book, things that didn't really make sense. So starting off early on, Kate goes to her BFF Willow to tell her that she's in love with Hermes, knowing that no one will support her, knowing that even Willow will be against her, but still she goes to ask Willow what she thinks and if she should pursue Hermes, just to be told no, don't do it, it's not safe. And then she is still somehow surprised when Willow says don't trust a god. That's kind of the culture among the nymphs. Also, how did she run into Willow standing at a random shop when she went running from the club when she met Hermes that time? It would have made much more sense for Kate to be upset with her best friend for not supporting her to go to the club to meet Hermes anyway, and Willow purposefully came chasing after Kate to stop her from putting herself in danger. Then they'd have both been caught by the gods, but instead, the setup goes that Kate goes alone, runs away from the boys, and then runs into Willow standing in a line outside of some random bar in an alleyway, and this in somehow the same time period and place on the planet. That's a lot of things that have to be in line right after she just got into a fight with Willow. Bea, the younger sister, comes to Kate at the start of the second rape arc to say that Jez is acting funny, and they both determine that Jez might be under the control of God or the brainwashing of God, who is going to wreck her and steal her halo. But then Bea refuses to help Kate bring her sister back because Kate and Jez fight way too much, and I don't want to be around that. So Bea, knowing that her sister's life might be in danger, not only refuses to help save her, but is also sending the sister who constantly butts heads and may just be like kerosene on the situation if she says, stop doing that. You sure that's what you want to go with? This just makes Bea look really bad, but okay. Jez isn't that important to Bea, and maybe Bea is just like good riddance. Near the end of the book, Atlas says that Zeus is unstoppable because he is a god. At the end of the book, near the end of the book, Atlas says that Zeus is unstoppable because he is the god of gods. The only thing that could stop him would be the council. We're also told earlier that Zeus is hiding on Earth from the council because they're seeking retribution against him for what he did to the nymphs. So Zeus is unstoppable except for the council currently looking for him, but this is also why Atlas has to kill him, because he's unstoppable. Or you could just tell the council where Zeus is hiding, because he's clearly hiding with your assistant / nymph prisoner, Layla. I'm so confused by some of this. How is it that one of the plot points is the older sister ridiculing the younger sister for falling in love with a god, and then we go through a time skip and the exact same thing happens, but it's the other way around? With absolutely nothing to show the difference in Jez, it makes absolutely no sense why she would just do a complete 180 and not be suspicious anymore. In Chapter 12, Zeus appears to be hiding out because if he's spotted, he'll be punished by the council. But he also goes on a villain's monologue about how he controls the council while he is also hiding from it. So if he is so afraid of getting in trouble, why is he literally bragging about his wrongdoings to somebody that could report him in a villain's monologue? And then he rapes that person that is not reporting him to the council. There is no consistency between whether Zeus is all-powerful with connections and corruption, or if he's being ousted by the supernatural council. I don't know if I missed something in this that makes me not understand that, but I accept it if I did. On the bad guy monologuing, one of the most annoying tropes that continually presented itself in this book is that the bad guys will randomly appear for no logical reason from their perspective to legitimately just brag about being bad guys, and there's nothing that you can do about it, and then they disappear. Again, this just destroys all characterization or depth at all. If you ask why this character would do this, there is no logical answer. It's just because you're supposed to hate these characters for being bad, but I can't hate something that's made out of cardboard. A specific example of this is when Blake's friend is poisoned, coughing up blood, and dying, and randomly in the crowd, Herma's still hanging around and transmits it to Blake's head that should have been you, while like looking at him. Why would you do this? Why would you out yourself? You're hunting somebody. You just don't, because now he's prepared, he's watching, he knows what you look like. Ego is one reason. Sure, I get that. If all of them were egotistical, they are gods after all. But these characters are never developed, and they literally all do the exact same thing. So, next guess. And I mentioned this previously, so I'll keep it short. Why would a nymph seek help from a race of people who are not bound by morals and who genocided and raped your people historically? This is referring to Jez saying, let's go ask Atlas for help. He's a fallen god. He's on the outs with the gods. There is no hesitation, no fear, no nothing when she approaches that. When she or the others approach him, even knowing what his past is and what he has done. When there should have been questioning, not only because of the history between their peoples, but also because she had been duped by a god before and stripped of her power. So how is it that she is still so trusting of gods? Right, because everything about this book is just moving the plot forward and the characters don't matter. They don't make a difference. At some point, Blake legitimately said, I'm the only thing standing between Kate's freedom or her rape and murder, and this never made sense how, other than Blake thought of himself more important than he actually was. He had no hand in her kidnapping, he had no power over Zeus. So just what? Contributing to this was just the speed at which this wanted to get through the plot points, so investment in the characters wasn't there. In the final battle with Zeus, Blake learns how to use actual weapons to fight gods in 2 days, and Jeslam, who is now mortal by the way, is able to fend off Zeus at the same level and make him sweat, nearly beating him already. Again, proving that Zeus has no actual power, and that the mortals are stronger than Zeus. So he's like a counterfeit god. Is he not actually Zeus? And then every time any bad guy said, "my dear" or "darling" is punctuation, I hated it. Not because it's gross, it's just because they all had the same voice. Every single time. And that was just them all talking in synchrony at that point. The last thing that I'll say, and this is going to be a bit more probably personal preference, so anybody that reads this, and I highly recommend that you read this if you're interested in the story, if you're interested in seeing what I'm talking about, or you're interested in seeing how any of this response stuff looks in context. I highly recommend you check out the book and see for yourself, and hey, maybe you'll like it more than me, because I'm also very specific on the things that I really don't like in books, and it's... Okay, so sensationalization is the last thing that I wanted to touch on here, because it felt like this was particularly sensational or overwritten when it came to using rape, and it felt like it was going for shock factor. An example is in chapter 31, where Layla says, "I watched as he raped my sisters, then slit their throats once he absorbed their halos. Finally, it was my turn. He grabbed my hair and spread my legs, but before he could do anything more." And then it trails, and and then she continues the story. This isn't always bad to do, and it could have made more sense. I might have been tired of it already, but after 70%, I just think that it was an overwritten way to write rape when rape is already all throughout this book. It just helped make this feel more like a sensationalized sexual fantasy of domination and of being desired to the point of non-con driving the gods crazy. Like this whole sentence, somebody like a rape survivor might have said this more as I watched as he raped my sisters and then slit their throats once he absorbed their halos. Finally, it was my turn, but before he could do anything. Like that makes more sense than getting into all of the minute details, specifically when rape has already been used so much throughout the entirety of the book. Every little detail like that just creates to this feeling of sensationalization. Sensationalism? Sensationalizing. Anyway, that's the last comment that I have on this book. If you have read it, I would love to hear your comments down below. Again, I highly recommend that you read it if you're interested in stories about gods or interested in stories about rape where it's the central thing. And I would love to hear your opinions on anything mentioned in this review at all. The reason I make these videos is so that I can talk about the books that I read, because that is a good time, whether I enjoy the book or not. So with all that said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful Monday, and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?